You're listening to LVB Podcast Show with your friend, advocate, and host, Alvaro.
Hello and welcome to LVB Show. My name is Alvaro and I'm very happy to be with you tonight. Before I introduce our guest, I want to say thank you so much to people listening from the United States, from the UK, from Canada, from Europe in general. We have people listening from Africa. We have people in Asia as well. Okay, so tonight we're doing something that we have been doing for some years now. We have a regular guest every year. His name is John Panarese. He's the founder of Mac for the Blind. I'm very happy to have him on to discuss the new release of iOS 14 and the new iPhones, iPad, Macs, etc. So thank you, John, for being with us tonight.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me again.
My pleasure, John. And my first question for those who don't know you, what can you tell us about you?
Well, I am basically, Mac for the Blind, as you said, is my company. I've been in the assistive technology business in general since 1993. I used to be a reseller of a variety of different products, and over the last 11 years, I've focused solely on training with the vast majority of what I do, specifically on Apple products. So I do in person if you're local, but I do most of my training by distance, Zoom, Skype, telephone, FaceTime. I also have a whole series of audio tutorials that are available for free and for sale, and I have been for the last 8 or 9 months, I've been running a series of online courses that anybody can sign up to. Some of them are free. Some of them cost a minimal fee to participate in. And there'll be new ones coming probably in February.
Those courses focus on what?
They jump around between iOS and Mac. So, for example, one of the first courses I'm going to do is a lot of people have asked me what ACSP means, the Apple Certified Support Professional certificate and exam. What does that exactly mean? What can you do with it? So I'm planning on doing sort of an intro for anybody who's interested and telling them what they get out of it, what is required of them, and all that stuff. And then I'm going to do a course. I did it back in the spring, but I figure there are still a lot of new Mac users out there. So I'm probably going to do an intro to VoiceOver and the Mac and kind of go over stuff, the basics of VoiceOver. And then sometimes I'll do targeted, like a specific application. For example, I did a course on Apple Mail in detail, and I did a course on web browsing and how, using Safari. But I may do that again, but I may include Google Chrome and Firefox as additional browsers to demonstrate with VoiceOver. So I have a lot of stuff planned.
Wow, I think that is wonderful. And if I may, on the air, give you a suggestion, John.
Mm-hmm.
Now so many people in the blind community are starting their own podcast. And there is a platform called Anchor. Do you know Anchor?
Yes.
Okay. I have heard it's not super accessible. It requires time to understand how to set it up, how to upload the audios that you produce, etc. Could you maybe someday do a course on that? I think would benefit many people trying to start with podcasting.
Yeah, I know a few people that are using Anchor. I have not played with it myself. I don't really do my own podcasts right now. I'm usually a guest or a co-host on other people's podcasts. I haven't done my own in many years. It's a time factor, it's having the time. And if I start a podcast myself, I want to be, consistent. I want it to be monthly or whatever. Right. And that's hard when you do what I do and your schedule's all over the place and you work with clients all over the world. I could be working at 8 o'clock in the morning my time. I could be up as late as 11 o'clock p.m. So it's very hard for me to try to plan out a regular podcast on my end. So I kind of like being guests and sort of co-host with other people who ask me to.
Right, right. Okay, my friend. So let's go into iOS 14. What are your thoughts, the good and the bad?
Really just good. I mean, it's just, the evolution of voiceover in iOS continues. I think sometimes in the blindness community, and even that is true among the sighted as well, sometimes I think there's way too much focus placed on bugs and
True,
issues. I
true.
think that they just emphasize what's wrong as opposed to what's great about it. I mean, there are going to be bugs in any software. I don't care who makes it. I don't care how good they're supposed to be. You're talking about millions of lines of code, and you're talking about several developers at the same time trying to work, side by side, so to speak. So something's going to break somewhere. And, even though voiceover is a part of the operating system, that doesn't mean it's immune to having problems caused when other things get changed. So as far as iOS 14 at this stage, all of the major bugs that people were talking about in the 0.0 release are pretty much gone. You might find a few minor things here and there. AppleVis, I believe applevis.com, applevis.com has a running sort of list of what, as far as I'm aware of, what are considered to be outstanding bugs, and that list has gotten smaller and smaller. To me, I really enjoy the fact that you are starting to be able to customize voiceover more and more. You can customize gestures. You can eliminate gestures. You can change gestures. You can basically, it's starting to mirror the types of things you've been able to do on the Mac with voiceover for a long time. And I also like this screen recognition feature that Apple is starting to slowly integrate with machine learning and artificial intelligence, where if you're dealing with an inaccessible website or an application, third-party application that has unlabeled buttons and the like, screen recognition will try to figure out or try to give you some kind of clue based on what it can detect to tell you what that is. So it's kind of in its early stages. It's obviously a new technology, but when you start to play with it, it's really amazing what its potential for us blind people in particular, and what other areas it could lend itself to, as time passes. So those are the major areas. I mean, there's nothing earth-shattering as far as iOS 14 and voiceover goes. It's just another, step along the road, and Apple's commitment to accessibility. And again, I know there's a small group of blind people that love to rattle their chains and moan and weep and claim that Apple is giving up on us and doesn't care about accessibility anytime a new release comes out. And it's like broken records at this point. But believe me, I've had enough contact with Apple accessibility. I've been contracted with Apple. I teach Apple employees. I could tell you their commitment to accessibility is as strong as it's always been. And just because there are bugs and there are minor bumps in the road, it does not reflect on Apple's lack of commitment to the blind. Believe me, that is not the case at all.
John, it is important for our listeners to understand and realize this point. For our listeners, John makes living working with Apple products, with blind and visually impaired people. So it wouldn't make any sense if Apple wouldn't work with accessibility. If Apple would be bad with accessibility, John wouldn't have a business.
Yeah, and I'm blind too. So
Oh,
if Apple starts to drop the ball and my accessibility to what I need to do starts to diminish, I'm going to be the first person to look for an alternative. It's not like I am so, my soul is invested, with Tim Cook. Believe
right,
me, I'm a blind person before anything else. So
right,
if there's a problem, I'm going to be one of the first people to talk about it, because it's going to affect my client base.
right. Very important point, John. Very important point, because I do hear that a lot sometimes in social media, etc., saying blah, 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 blah. And we have to say that we are so productive thanks to what Apple started doing so many years ago, and that Android is starting to copy. And we have to be clear about that. If it wasn't for Apple, Google wouldn't be stepping up for the plate in
Right.
other things as well.
And the other thing about Android is, remember, Android is open source.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's not supported by Google per se,
Right.
and their accessibility is always going to be questionable because it's like Windows in the sense that when you buy an Android device, you have bloatware, you have all accessibility is not going to be the same if you buy a Motorola or you buy an LG or you buy a Google product.
Right.
Obviously a Google product, you're probably going to have the most vanilla, straightforward form of Android. But I've played with Android. My girlfriend has, for her union business, she has an Android phone. And on occasion, when we're sitting in the car or at her house, I'll start messing with it. And I don't care what any Android person says. Apple is still a good 5 years ahead in consistency. Any iPhone that you purchase, any iPad that you put your hands on, VoiceOver is going to be the same. You're not having to deal with the stuff like Android. I consider for people, if you're a tinkerer, like when I was first in the business of accessibility and there really was no Apple per se, and I was a Windows reseller and I used to build PCs with my brother. That's what I kind of view Android people. If you're going to love Android, you really got to be a tinkerer. You got to be somebody who's not afraid to mess with stuff. Most consumers are not like that. Most consumers just want something to work. And it's funny how as I've gotten older, not that I don't mind tinkering, and I guess that's why I do play with my girlfriend's Android phone and my brother's tablet once in a while, because I guess I just, I still have that little thing in me to do that. But I'm at a point in my life professionally and personally where I love Apple because the stuff just works. It's not like Windows. I know we haven't talked about the Mac stuff yet, but, no matter what, Windows 10, I don't care what you're talking about. You still got viruses. You still got crashes. Jaws is still Jaws. It's still a monstrosity. I've had to teach a few people Jaws in the last year. And I am so baffled by the love affair that some people have with Jaws and Windows. I just don't get it. It is such a layered, cumbersome way to compute. I don't know. I don't get it, but that's, whatever. If anything, Apple has made the landscape for accessibility. We have choices.
Yes.
Another choice. That's also how I look at it as a blind person.
Very good point, John. And getting into the new iPhones that were released last year, can you tell us about the different models of the iPhone 12, and what are the main differences between them?
It's really bells and whistles and, that kind of thing. I have an iPhone 12 Pro. My brother just got a 12 Pro Max. Those are the top of the line one. The Pro Max is the largest of the phones. It's got the super camera. It's basically better than most professional cameras. So from a blind perspective, if you're totally blind, I don't know really why you would want to get a Max. If you got some low vision and you can see a screen, then perhaps the larger screen might make a difference. I'm not going to comment on that because I can't see. So, but I do know people who are older who do have sight that appreciate the larger screen because they simply can't see the smaller screen. But you do have the 12, the regular 12 and the 12 mini, and its cost, it's, what you can afford. I mean, I don't, if there's any complaint that I have about Apple and Tim Cook, they've sort of muddied the waters a little too much in the iOS world, where you have all these models of iPads, you have all these models of iPhones, And I understand it specifically from a marketing standpoint that you want to cover all your bases and kind of have a niche in every tier, I guess, of potential consumer purchasers. But I think it does lend itself to a bit of confusion as to what the average consumer, when they're sitting in an Apple store going, which one should I buy? And it's a little daunting because you don't know if you're making the right choice. So, I mean, all I can really say is look at the price, look what you can afford. As a blind person, again, it's my humble opinion, and I know there may be people out there that will get jump up and down enraged when they hear me say this, but I don't, if you're just an average blind person looking for a very good phone, a 12 is fine. You don't necessarily have to go with the 12 Pro or the 12 Pro Max. You can get away with the Mini. I've not, because of the COVID, the pandemic, I've not been able to go into an Apple store and really sit down and handle the different phones. I've been in Best Buy, but I've really not had the opportunity to kind of, hold the phones in my hand and kind of get a feel, play with them a little bit. Because, that's the one thing I do when I go in an Apple store that you can't do in a Microsoft store. I can turn on VoiceOver and I can start messing with the products right there in the store, whether it be an iPad, an iPhone, a Mac. So I like to do that because I like to see how things kind of feel for me as an experience. So unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to do that with all of the iPhone models. I've only, my knowledge is based on what I've read and from speaking to some blind people who have purchased them.
Okay, a few questions about the new iPhones and the comparison with others. For instance, if you have the iPhone 6 Plus, when it comes to size, compare that to an iPhone 12. Do you think the feeling in your hand, if you're going to hold it for some time, is going to feel heavy or uncomfortable in your hand? And the reason I'm asking this, John, is I know many people with the iPhone 6 Plus and the iPhone 6, and they want to upgrade, but they are confused about the size of the phone when it's going to come to handling the phone, whether it's going to feel well or not in your hand, is going to fit my pocket. And the other question that I get a lot is, what about the screen sensitivity? Those kinds of things. What would you say about that?
I think if you are using a larger phone right now, if you're using a Plus model right now, you're probably going to be looking at at a Max. I really, again, I know that the 12 Pro is probably smaller as far as screen size goes. I don't have the measurements in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it's smaller than the 6 Plus screen, because my brother Steve used to have a 6 Plus, and it was I used to call it a piece of toast because it just seemed as big as a piece of toast. Where, I mean, the phones weight-wise, I think the 12s, they've gotten a little bit heavier. They were kind of going to the lighter and the lighter and the lighter. I think the 12 Pro is a little bit heavier, but I don't think it's that much heavier than the 6 Plus was.
Okay.
This is one of the things, and I say this all the time to blind people. It's very important for us to have hands-on with these devices.
Right.
You really need to hold it. You really need to kind of weigh it in your hand. You need to put your fingers on it and make sure that the screen is large enough that you can do gestures comfortably. I've worked with people, and it's funny. I have a friend who she is very finicky about the size of screens because of her finger gestures.
Right.
And, she needs a larger screen. And it's not that she's a big person. She's not. She's a small woman, but she just feels more comfortable when it comes to the gestures that, she wants to have enough room that she feels is on a screen. Where I've worked with other people that they get lost on the larger screens. And they don't even like iPads because they feel like they just get lost in nowhere because the screen is so big. So they prefer an SE model with the smaller screen, because then they feel like they have more control over the screen real estate.
Well, so many things come to mind. Screen sensitivity, John. I have heard some people saying you have to get used to the screen sensitivity of new models compared to the iPhone 6 or 5S because it's much more powerful, the sensitivity when you touch the screen. What do you say?
I don't think that's true from what I can remember. And also remember, you can change the sensitivity in touch accommodations and accessibility under touch accommodations. So if you feel that you're triggering things on accident too much, go into accessibility under touch accommodations and mess with some of the settings in there, the repeat and the delay and all that stuff. And, even in VoiceOver, you can increase the delay, the VoiceOver settings, for your taps. I think it's 0.25 seconds is what the default is, but you can change that. So if you feel that you're accidentally causing apps to open or doing things that you don't expect or want to happen, you might want to take a look at some of the adjustments you can make. And because they are, the thing you got to remember, and it doesn't matter what model of iPhone, the entire screen is touch sensitive. So one of the things when I work with clients, one of the first things I try to explain to a new iPhone or a new iPad user is, as a blind person, you have to be conscious of where your hands and your fingers are, and how you hold the phone can make a big difference in how successful or frustrated you're going to get using the phone. I have a client right now who he's really having a hard time because I call him lazy fingers, because he starts off with the best intentions, but he just tends, as time passes, it's like his fingers become lead weights. So all of a sudden he's trying to do single finger double taps and he's muting the speech with the 3-finger double tap because 2 other fingers have joined the party. And he kind of isn't aware of that, like consciously aware, until I say something to him. So you really have to pay attention as a blind person where your fingers are when you do the gestures, and try not to, just touch the screen incidentally while you're handling the phone. I know that's not always easy, but believe me, you will do yourself a bigger service if you try to hold the phone on the sides of its case and try not to have your fingers constantly brushing or tapping the screen when you're handling your phone or your iPad.
Now, protecting the screen, that's another big talk on social media. Do you like screen protectors? What kind of case for iPhone do you recommend to get?
I just have a bumper case. Sometimes people get the otter boxes and the really heavy duty cases. Remember this though, when you buy a case and you put a case on your phone, you're making that phone heavier and thicker. So you want to be really cognizant of what case you purchase for your device. That's why I got a bumper case, because it's good enough. It protects the phone if I drop it, but it's not increasing the width, the thickness of the phone, nor the weight of the phone. So when I put it in my pocket or I put it in it, I have like a belt case that I use. It doesn't make a difference. Like it's not. I've handled other people's phones that the cases literally make the phone twice as thick as it normally is without a case. And I think some people have this mentality that a thicker case means better protection. And and I guess from a technical standpoint that might be true, but the way these cases are made these days, believe me, these bumper cases are extremely durable. I have dropped my phone over the years with these bumper cases and have not done any damage. Screen protectors, if you have an older iPhone, I think it's much more valuable to have some kind of a screen protector. Supposedly the 12 models are made with a more durable kind of scratch resistant glass, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't necessarily consider a screen protector. and again, as a blind person, I'm saying this, so I don't want people to take offense to this, but some blind people I've known over the years, and it's just like sighted people. I'm not saying we're any different than sighted people. They're just careless with technology. They just drop things, they bang their devices into walls, into chairs, into whatever, because they just, their minds are on other things. So if you know yourself to be more of that careless sort of person, you definitely want to get a screen protector as well as a case for your phone. I don't care what model it is.
John, when you talk about this case that you have, this how do you call it? This
It's a bumper case.
Bumper case. That bumper case protects the screen too.
You can get bumper cases that have a screen protector built into them. Mine doesn't. I got a separate, I forget what it's called, something glass. It's something that you can get through Apple when you're in the store. I forget what it's called, of course. It's a Saturday morning and my coffee hasn't kicked in.
Right. So you have both. You have
Yes.
The screen protection. Okay. How much can that be, that glass?
I think it was, you're probably better off going through a third party. You probably want to pay maybe for the glass in the case. You can get the case from Amazon for like $15 US. Okay. And the glass protection is probably another $10 or $15 depending on where you go. I got mine. Actually, I didn't get it through Apple. I got it up in Buffalo at my where my brother was. There was a mall nearby where my brother lives, and I got it in one of the kiosks. They have like their little kiosks in the middle of the mall, and the guy gave me the case, and he did the screen protection for $25.
Now, John, is it easy to take off?
The case, yeah. Yeah, the screen protector, basically no. The screen protector, once you have the screen protector on the glass, you're it's there. But the case comes off easily. I mean, I took this case off a couple of times to clean the phone.
Does that case protect the side buttons?
Yes.
Aha, that's good. I think that's good. I like that, Okay, that information is pretty good because you're absolutely right. Sometimes you have a heavy case and then you're going to say, oh my God, this phone is big, but now with this case so powerful, it's going to be hard to hold it for more than 5 minutes.
Right. So and it's just carrying it, putting it someplace in your pocket or whatever. When you have a case that's like a monstrosity,
yes,
you and it's like, even like people who are, they get those battery cases, the case that has the battery built into it.
Yes.
That's like tripling the thickness of your phone in some instances. So if you're okay with that, again, I'm not criticizing anybody that does that. You just have to make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into. If that's okay, if that's what you want, then that's great. You get whatever you want. But for me personally, I'm very conscious of that because, like I said, I have a belt case here, and I can't have the phone be too thick where it's not going to fit into this case.
Right. It makes sense. Okay, now charging the iPhone, wireless charging or wired charging. What do you like? What do you prefer?
Oh, I've become spoiled. My girlfriend bought me I can't remember if it was a Belkin. It's a charger that does the iPhone. It has the watch thing. You can put the watch on it, and it also can recharge the AirPod Pros.
Wow.
So I am a wireless I had a wireless pad for a couple of years, I think since the iPhone 8. I am let me put it this way. Me and wires don't get along. If there's going to be wires involved, they're going to get tangled with me. They're going to always get lost. Like they'll always fall. The connector will always fight with me. Yes. So I love wireless charging. I just love the ability just to put the phone down on the pad and it's good to go. So, I'm going to be an advocate of wireless here. I do carry like when I go away on vacation or if I'm doing an accessibility presentation or a teaching thing, I will take chargers just in case. Like I always have spare chargers just in case. But wireless is my preference.
I'm gonna do that too. I'm gonna get a wireless charger for our listeners once I get a new iPhone for sure. I have millions of problems with these wires. My goodness. So I understand your point, John. Now, these days, talking about the iPhone 11 or 12, how long does it take to fully charge the iPhone on a wireless charger?
Just a couple of hours, as far as I'm aware, because a lot of times I put the phone on the charger before I go to bed, so I'm not really paying attention. But I would say within a couple of hours, it charges pretty fast. Like I said, I got a newer one. Obviously, you want to look you're going to buy a wireless charger. Do yourself a favor. Look at the specs. Read the details. Make sure that it says that it is compatible with your iPhone model. You don't want to get a charger that's like 5 years old that may not be powerful enough to do like an iPhone or 11 or an iPhone 12, in a swift amount of time. The other thing you can do too, as a side note, regardless of what iPhone model you have and regardless of whether you're using wireless or wired charging, you can always put your device, iPhone, iPad, iPod Touch, into airplane mode while you're charging it. You'll get a much faster charge that way, at least 4 or 5 times faster than if it's not in airplane mode.
Really?
Yeah, it's an interesting tip. A friend of mine sent me an article a couple of years ago, and I was kind of curious about it, so I started to experiment. And sure enough, if you put your phone or your device in airplane mode, it definitely charges a lot faster.
Wow, that's a great tip for sure for our listeners. Now, earphones, headphones, blah, blah, blah. What do you like?
Well, I'm going to, again, not to sound like an Apple fanboy, I have the AirPod Pros. I like having the no wires. I can't tell you how many earbuds and wired headphones and stuff I've ruined over the years because of the wires, or they just have gotten frayed, or I broke a adapter, the headphone port on a MacBook Pro about 5 years ago because the wire got kind of somehow got roped around my forearm, and I went to stand up to grab my office phone, and somehow I ended up snapping the charge, the connector right in the port.
Wow.
So I had to take it to Apple. Unfortunately, with Apple Care, it didn't cost me anything for them to fix it, but the guy was telling me it would have been a $400 repair otherwise.
Wow.
So I like the earbuds. I'm curious about those new over-the-ear AirPods, the Max that Apple has. I am curious because I've just always been a sound junkie. I love when I listen to music. I'm very finicky about the quality of the music and the quality of even when I listen to like audio stuff, like podcasts and stuff. So I'm particularly curious about the over the ear things because, sound cancellation, noise cancellation, when you want to listen to music, the cancellation part is, to me, very important. So I definitely am curious about the Apple AirPod Maxes, but I love my AirPod Pros. I go everywhere with them. I use them all the time.
And they are easy to get into your ears. They will not fall or something.
They have they have like a different tips. So if the tip that comes with it isn't accommodating to you, you can try out different tips and see if something fits better. And then they have a noise cancellation test that you can run when you connect them with your iPhone or your iPad or your iPod. You can run this test to see how it feels. You're canceling out the noise. I forgot what the test is exactly called. It's not in front of me. So, but it's the ones that I didn't change the tips on mine. the tips were fine in my ears. They don't fall out. The only thing you got to be careful of is if you hit your ear or you hit the side of your head for any reason, you might pop them out that way. Like my girlfriend had that happen where she was getting out of her car and she was trying to put her jacket on, and somehow the jacket clipped the back of her ear and her AirPod went flying into the parking lot.
Oh.
So, in instances like that, you just got to kind of be, and I've done that I use when I work out and I get on the elliptical machine and stuff. And on occasion, I've ended up just brushing the side of my ear enough that I've popped the AirPod out, and it's fallen on the floor. And then, when something falls on the floor as a blind person, it can be a crisis sometimes.
Right. I know what you mean, John. Okay. Talking about transferring files from your phone to your computer or vice versa, I have heard that now you can plug in the USB drives on the iPhone, the new iPhones using iOS 13 or 14. How does that work in terms of USB thumb drives on the iPhone?
I haven't really played with that. I believe you have to have a specific adapter, and you want to check your iPhone model and your iPad model with Apple and make sure that you do purchase the right adapter. And I think that I'm trying to remember now, the iPad OS works with everything, whether it's a USB drive or a thumb drive. But I think the iPhone only will do a USB thumb drive. I think it has to be, I don't think it could be like a large disc that you plug in. You know what I mean? Like a Lacey or a Western Digital. I think those only work with the iPad OS. If I could be wrong, but I remember that. I thought I remember that being the limitation. When I started to research, because I wanted to try it with my iPad model, and I started to kind of, I wasn't sure what adapter I needed. That was really the problem that I had, and I didn't follow through. It's my fault because I didn't go the distance as far as making sure I got the right adapter.
Okay, now to finish with the iPhones, I would like to know your opinion about those rumors that maybe a pen is going to come to the iPhone as it is available now for the iPad and some Android tablet.
I could see Apple doing that. They have the Apple Pencil, and it works with the iPads. So I could see them making that an option down the road. It wouldn't surprise me at this point. It's already exists. So why couldn't they adapt that to work with an iPhone? And I could see from the not necessarily from the blindness perspective, but certainly from the sighted perspective, I could see why an Apple Pencil for your iPhone would be valuable.
Okay, moving to the iPad, what do you say about the new iPads, the new technologies? What do you find interesting?
I just think the thing I find the most interesting is that they're becoming more like laptop computers. The Apple processors that they've been now, obviously the Mac, they're moving away from Intel. But you got to remember the iPads have had these, the A12s, the A13s, the Bionic chips. And so Apple's really been in the chip manufacturing business for several years. And I know I've read and I've spoken to some people who know this technical stuff, and iPads are pretty much blow the doors off of a lot of Windows laptops as far as, specifications and capabilities go. So I think that with these iPads, you're really neck and neck with, having basically the equivalent of a laptop in your hands. Again, going back to my earlier point that I said about the iPhones, I think the problem is, there's too many iPad models and it confuses people to the point of, okay, you have the iPad Pros, you have the 12.4 4-inch and the 11-inch, and then you have the, the Airs, the different size screens, and then you have the basic, like I have a basic iPad, what is it, 9.7-inch or whatever it is. The lowest model I basically bought back before the pandemic started. In fact, I think I was in an Apple store like a week before they started shutting down the stores, because my iPad that I had was from 2012 and it wasn't running, able to run iOS 13, let alone iOS 14. So I needed to get an iPad, and I didn't want to spend a lot of money because I don't use the iPad in a way that really justified buying an iPad Pro or anything like that. So I just got the basic model. But, I think what it comes down to from a consumer perspective is, what are you planning on using this device for? As a blind person, do you really need an iPad Pro with a 12.9, whatever it is, inch screen and the Apple Pencil? I don't know. I guess, I don't want to say no, because I'm sure there's a blind person out there that will come to me and say, well, this is what I do and this is why I need it. And I'm not going to argue with anybody, but, from a practical standpoint, I just don't see why you would need a Pro.
Good point. Now, going to the Mac, the new operating system, what is new?
Well, it's OS 11 now. They've moved away from OS 10, so it's kind of like they're really trying to make a statement that this is a new operating system, and I guess it coincides with the fact that Apple, as I said, they have their system on a chip, the SoC. They're moving away from Intel, the x86 technology they've outgrown. And, realistically, Intel really, the numbers game is not fooling people anymore. You're really not getting a lot more out of your chip functionality, where, from what I've reading with the multi-cores and what Apple is doing, it's basically blowing the doors off of Windows PCs right now. Big Sur, I think, is kind of that bridge operating system. That, as I said, it's now OS 11. So now we're going to have, the OS 11 versions of the Mac operating system. From a voiceover perspective, really, there's not a lot of change to it. I mean, there's some minor stuff. Again, we have the screen recognition that you have in iOS you can turn on. It's an additional setting in the voiceover utility. You have the, a couple of new keyboard shortcuts. You can get to the notification center with Control Option O. The one big thing that's kind of thrown some users off is the way that notifications in general are handled in Mac OS 11. They're kind of melding iOS and Mac OS when it comes to voiceover, so they make use of the action menu. So what happens when you get a notification now on your Mac, if you're running Big Sur, is you press Control Option Command Spacebar to activate the action menu. Then you use VO down arrow or VO up arrow to explore the options. Now, the options are going to be based on what type of notification you're dealing with. But generally speaking, there's usually a close button someplace in that list. So that's how you handle notifications at this stage. It's not as difficult. It's not as earth-shattering as some blind people are like, what happened to notifications? I don't know what to do about them. The other thing that I think might be the product of a bug, I'm not 100% sure, but sometimes the notifications pop up and VoiceOver doesn't necessarily tell you you're in a notification screen. So what happens is you start to VO arrow around and doing what you thought you were doing, and all of a sudden you just get that boundary sound, that little, that sound that tells you can't go in one direction or the other.
Right.
If that's the case, then try doing VO Command Spacebar and see if somehow a notification has opened.
Now, John, my two final questions. My first final question is about what I have heard. before I heard these rumors, I have been analyzing where do I feel Apple is going in terms of different products. And I found that maybe the Apple glasses may be coming, or so I'm hearing. So I'm hearing for many reasons, John. And if you take a look at new features on iOS 13, 14, the screen recognition, the LiDAR that is being used as well these days for distances, I feel the Apple glasses would be a wonderful product. And I do believe, John, and this is just me, I have no idea if it's going to happen or not. 2-3 years down the road, you may have those glasses telling you when you're walking in front of you, you have a person sitting down in a bench. To your right, you have a McDonald's restaurant and it's open, blah, blah, blah. I don't think the technology is far away from recognizing what is in front of us as we walk. What do you say about this kind of thought?
I absolutely agree. I think if you look at the landscape and all the different accessibility features, the screen recognition and everything else, I think there's going to be a convergence. And I think that for blind people that that this convergence of technology is going to be almost science fiction like. And I think I personally have said the same things that you just said. I could foresee in a not so distant future a blind person wearing these Apple glasses, basically having the freedom and independence to get around a city or an airport or a mall with relative ease, because they'll be told, they'll get descriptions, and they'll have control over how much description they have, or if they're looking for a specific thing, it will integrate with, Apple Maps. And, you have this beacon technology, you have all this stuff kind of coming together. And I just hope that it's sooner rather than later. I mean, as a blind person, I get such a thrill of thinking that, and then, not to take things a step further into the realm of science fiction, but, throw into that the driverless cars.
Yes. Unbelievable technology that is coming in precisely today, although this interview is being recorded, and today is, I believe, January 9th?
Yes.
Yes. I just heard that Hyundai has, I'm not sure if it is an agreement with Apple to work on driverless cars. I just heard that today, precisely.
Yeah, I heard that they were in discussions, but then they were walking it back a little bit, so maybe it was premature, and Apple kind of said, hey, don't be talking about this right now, but I see it coming, and they've been talking about driverless cars for a long time, and Apple, I think, has been waiting to see what everybody else does with driverless. This is the thing about Apple. I always laugh that there's critics out there of Apple because, like Apple will take an idea and people say, well, that's been out there for years. Yeah, but it hasn't worked. Apple comes along and they make it work. Like people say, well, the iPod was not Apple's invention. It was actually, it wasn't Apple's invention, but Apple took it, fixed it, and made it work right. So what's to say driverless cars and all the problems that, Google and Tesla and everybody else have been having with driverless cars, Apple's sitting back and learning from their mistakes.
Right, you're absolutely right. John, a final question about this is, do you use regularly the IRA service?
No, I had issues with them in the beginning. They broke promises when I was one of the pioneers years ago, and they made us promises because it was they were like at the NFB 2000, was it 15? I think it was, or something like that. And we were supposed to be, I think they called us pioneers or something like that. And I don't want to get into, the details on a podcast, but I kind of got turned off to the way they treated us. And I know people that are using it, and I'm not saying at all it's a bad service, because from my understanding, it's very good.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are an independent traveling blind person, it definitely behooves you to look into, it's because they have different tiers, and I think you can even get it for free on a limited basis at this point.
Yes. Yes.
It's just not something I have gotten myself. I kind of haven't gotten the bad taste out of my mouth yet from the beginning. And I'll get there. I'm not saying that I'm not ever going to use them, but at this point, I'm kind of hoping that Apple comes along with their Apple glasses.
Well, that's a good point, John. And I cannot let you go before talking a little bit about GPS. I have been attending many seminars about GPS on mobile devices, where it's going in terms of how to get to the door of the place you're looking for, not just 30 feet away, and how to get directions inside a building, indoor navigation. I want your thoughts on that technology.
I think that's coming along too. I think that's part of that beacon technology I mentioned earlier. And again, I think from a blind person's perspective, these devices have just given us so many gifts. And I think that's going to be part of it, where GPS integrates into not just, large scale GPS. How do you get from here to, in town, but within a store, front or a mall. If I want to get to the Apple store, or I need to get to Macy's, or I want to get to the, the men's room or the ladies' room, this is the type of technology that I think we're going to be able to take advantage of. And I think you're right. It isn't just going to be a matter of it saying, the door is, 50 feet to your left. It's going to tell you when you're actually at the door. And, it's going to tell you what stores are there, what stores are open. I just think that, as I said, there's going to be a convergence of all this stuff at some point. And I think it's just going to be great for us as blind people, and what it's going to mean for our independence and self-reliance.
John, this is just my comment. I know your point of view about this, but I'm going to say it very clearly as well to our listeners. I have been doing this show for almost 11 years. I have been a person with a disability for decades. Something that I have to say, and I hope people don't get it the wrong way, but it has to be said. We are in the best time to be blind, to have a vision impairment, because technology, you guys have the ADA. There are many, many things that we didn't have 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And we have to be more grateful than angry at when things don't work as we hope they will. And I say that because, as you have said before, I am very grateful, and I say it because it's the truth, about what Apple has done with the iPhone for me, for my life. It changed it. I needed for work to have a way to do text messaging and millions of other things, and I was able to do it when I got my first iPhone 4S in 2012. And I have to say thank you to Mark Ramnott and Ed Plumacher in New York City, who helped me understand the importance of the iPhone at that point. So for people who are blind or vision impaired to complain all the time, oh my God, the new iPhone have this, the other iOS have this, nothing in life is perfect. Look at life. Nothing in life is perfect. And we have to be grateful.
And that's the thing. I think sometimes blind people, especially when you're younger, you don't have that perspective of what we had, where we came from.
Yes.
And, for you or I who've been around the block a few times, we get it. We can look back and, I can remember, I always tell some of my younger clients who are college students, I didn't even, I was tape recording my classes. I didn't have a note taker. I didn't have an iPad. I didn't have any of that stuff. I used to type my term papers on a regular typewriter. When I used to have a sighted person proofread them for me because there was no OCR software. Yeah, Brontosaurus wasn't walking the planet, but, it was pretty close. So, you got to, but just one side note, though, and again, I'm not trying to be cynical or whatever, but as much as technology has changed and we've definitely, the ADA, et cetera. Unfortunately, though, and I think blind people universally will agree with me that not necessarily the attitudes and ignorance of sighted people have necessarily improved. I find it very interesting and fascinating that with all this talk of diversity and acceptance, that we are still treated sometimes like we're plague bearers. People just don't know how to handle blind people and their expectations of our abilities, and they treat us like we're stupid or, we're not just blind, but we're deaf too. And that's the one thing Apple or anybody else, Google, Microsoft, none of them are going to be able to fix that.
Mm. And that is true. That is true. There's a long way to go still. You're absolutely right, John. So, my friend, tell us, please, how can people reach out to you?
Well, you can visit the website as a starter, www.macfortheblind.com, macfortheblind.com. You can drop me an email, John, JOHN, at macfortheblind.com, and you can call the office, area code 631-724-4479. And since I do work with people most of the days, there really isn't no standard business hours here. So you're probably going to get me, as long as you're not calling me at 3 o'clock in the morning, my time. But for the most part, you'll be able to get me. So please check out the website. Please get in touch with me. I love to correspond and interact with people all over the world. So I definitely welcome it.
Well, John, it's been a privilege to have you on. What a great discussion we have had tonight, I have to say, my friend.
Yeah, well, thank you again.
My pleasure, John. And for our listeners, always remember to smile. If you want to be on the show, you can email me at lowvisionbureau@gmail.com. So this is Alvaro from LVB Show saying good night.